A Korean mother stood at a train station waiting for her son. She expected to see him again in a few days. She never did. A border suddenly appeared between them. Also, a father was trapped in the north. His daughter was stranded in the south. Neighbors became foreigners overnight. Families who had shared meals for generations suddenly found themselves separated by soldiers, barbed wire, and politics. The most shocking part? The border that divided Korea was never meant to be permanent. Yet more than 80 years later, it still exists. For more than 1,000 years, Korea existed as a single civilization. It had one culture, one language, one identity. Yet today, the Korean peninsula is divided into two countries that could hardly be more different. One side became a global technology powerhouse filled with skyscrapers, K-pop, and some of the world's fastest internet speeds. The other became one of the most secretive and militarized states on Earth. So, how did one nation become two? The answer begins with an empire that wasn't even Korean. In the early 1900s, Korea found itself trapped between powerful neighbors competing for influence in East Asia. Among them was Japan, which had rapidly transformed itself into a modern military power. In 1910, Japan officially annexed Korea. For the next 35 years, Koreans lived under Japanese colonial rule. The occupation was harsh. Korean language and culture were suppressed. Many Koreans were forced to adopt Japanese names. Resources were extracted to fuel Japan's growing empire. Yet amid the suffering, a shared Korean identity became even stronger. The dream of independence never disappeared. Then came World War II. As the war raged across Europe and Asia, Japan expanded aggressively throughout the Pacific. But by 1945, the empire was collapsing. The United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Soviet Union declared war on Japan and invaded Japanese-held territories in Asia. Japan surrendered. For Koreans, this should have been the moment of liberation. Instead, it became the beginning of division. With Japan defeated, someone had to accept the surrender of Japanese forces stationed in Korea. American officials, working hastily in Washington, looked at a map and made a decision that would alter history. They chose the 38th parallel. The line was almost arbitrary. 2 American officers reportedly selected it in just a matter of hours. The goal was simple. Soviet forces would accept the Japanese surrender north of the line, while American forces would do so south of it. At the time, many believed this division would be temporary. Nobody imagined it would become one of the most heavily guarded borders in the world. The Soviets entered northern Korea. The Americans entered southern Korea. Almost immediately, the emerging tensions of the Cold War began reshaping the peninsula. The Soviet Union wanted a communist government in the north. The United States wanted a non-communist government in the south. What started as a military arrangement slowly transformed into a political divide. In the north, a young guerrilla fighter named rose to power with Soviet backing. In the south, an anti-communist leader named became the dominant political figure. Both men claimed they were the rightful leader of all Korea. Neither accepted the idea of permanent division. By 1948, 2 separate governments officially emerged. In the north, the was established. In the south, the was founded. One nation had become 2 states, but the story was far from over. In fact, things were about to become much worse. At dawn on the 25th of June, 1950, North Korean forces surged across the 38th parallel. Tanks rolled south. Artillery thundered. The Korean War had begun. Kim Il-sung believed he could reunify the peninsula through force. At first, it looked like he might succeed. North Korean troops advanced rapidly, pushing South Korean and American forces into a small corner of the peninsula known as the Pusan Perimeter. The situation looked hopeless. Then came a dramatic reversal. American general launched a daring amphibious landing at Incheon. The operation stunned North Korean forces. Suddenly, the tide turned. UN forces pushed north, recapturing Seoul and advancing toward the Chinese border. Now it appeared that South Korea might reunify Korea instead. But history had another twist waiting. China feared hostile forces approaching its frontier, so hundreds of thousands of Chinese soldiers entered the war. The conflict exploded into a brutal struggle involving millions of troops. Cities changed hands multiple times. Families were torn apart. Entire communities vanished. The war became one of the deadliest conflicts of the 20th century. By the time the fighting stabilized, the front lines had returned close to where they started. After 3 years of devastating warfare, an armistice was signed in 1953. Notice something important. An armistice is not a peace treaty. Technically, the Korean War never officially ended. North and South Korea remain in a state of war even today. The armistice created the Korean Demilitarized Zone, often called the DMZ. Ironically, despite its name, it became one of the most heavily fortified borders on Earth. Barbed wire, minefields, guard towers, and soldiers now separated people who once belonged to the same nation. Parents were cut off from children. Brothers lost contact with sisters. Many never saw each other again. Yet, while the border remained fixed, the two Koreas began moving in dramatically different directions. In the decades after the war, North Korea initially appeared surprisingly successful. Its industrial economy grew rapidly. Some observers even believed it might outperform the South. Meanwhile, South Korea struggled with poverty, political instability, and military rule. If you had visited the peninsula in the 1960s, you might have predicted that the North had the brighter future. But history had one final surprise. South Korea gradually embraced economic reforms, industrialization, and eventually democracy. Companies such as Samsung.com, Hyundai.com, and LG.com became global giants. The country transformed into one of the world's leading economies. Its music, films, television shows, and technology spread across the globe. North Korea took a different path. The regime became increasingly isolated. Power passed from Kim Il-sung to his son, and later to his grandson. The country focused heavily on military development and maintained strict control over information and society. Over time, the gap between the two Koreas became enormous. Today, satellite images taken at night reveal one of the most striking contrasts on Earth. South Korea glows brightly with city lights. North Korea appears largely dark. It's a powerful visual reminder of how differently the two nations evolved after sharing the same history for centuries. And yet, despite everything, the connection remains. Families separated by the border still dream of reunion. People on both sides speak the same language and share deep cultural roots stretching back more than a millennium. The border may divide governments, armies, and political systems, but it cannot completely erase a shared past. The tragedy of Korea's division is that it was never originally the choice of most Koreans. It emerged from the collision of empires, the end of World War II, and the global rivalry of the Cold War. A line drawn on a map by foreign powers became one of the most consequential borders in modern history. And that is perhaps the most remarkable part of the story. The split that created North Korea and South Korea was meant to be temporary, a few months, perhaps a few years. Instead, that temporary line has endured for generations, shaping the lives of millions and creating one of the world's most enduring geopolitical mysteries. More than 80 years later, the question that once seemed simple remains unanswered. Will Korea ever become one country again? If you enjoyed this story, hit like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating hidden histories from around the world.